What's that? A bonus episode?
Whoop, whoop.
It would probably be a little bit more of a surprise if we hadn't teased it in last week's episode. But anyway, here we go. We have got a bonus episode for you all about Christmas.
Yay!
We
Makes me
are
very
in.
excited.
Yeah. We are in September, and we thought it would be a good time to check in and see how you're doing with your Christmas planning. Now, maybe you've been super organized and you've planned in everything and strategized all the way back in, I don't know, June. You were finished and the graphics were ready to go. Or maybe you've been so snowed under that you've not even had the chance to think about the Harvest Festival in a week or two, let alone Christmas. Perhaps somewhere in between. Wherever you are, we want to give you a really concise, actionable, step-by-step guide to this year's Christmas publicity so that you can get it off of your to-do list and it doesn't need to cause you any more stress. So let's get into it.
Yay. In the past, we've talked about things that you can do in advance of the Christmas publicity, things which would be really helpful to include as part of your yearly comms cycle, which will help you to plan in advance and make your life easier when it comes to actually producing the Christmas comms. But let's assume for the moment that this ship has sailed. Let's imagine that we've reached September and this is the absolute first thought that you've given to promoting the church's Christmas events.
Uh-oh.
I mean, it feels wrong to be talking about Christmas in September, let alone kind of August and June. But don't panic. No, not least because you're not the only one, but also because we're here to help you and make it easier for you. So let's get going. Let's plan Christmas, which makes me so excited. And we're going to try and keep it simple and make things as simple and streamlined as possible with some questions.
Yeah, so the first one is, what Christmas events does the church have planned? Now, it sounds really obvious, but I would think it is a really helpful thing to do to write a list of all of the Christmas events that you're going to be doing. Include every Christmas-related activity, and probably you want to include some key details as well. So things like the dates or booking information if that's needed.
Yeah.
You know, possibly in a larger church, include someone who's the main point of contact for each event. And that's going to help your thinking when you just see everything in black and white on paper. It's going to make things a bit easier to go ahead. And then from there, ask the next question of, does your church family know what is going on? And this is really important because if your church doesn't have the events in their diaries, it's going to be really difficult to not only get them along, but to find organisers and to find volunteers and to get things organised. So that's really helpful. And to fix this, you can start mentioning straight away your events in an upcoming Sunday service. Perhaps you could also include them in a church-wide email, or maybe share this information of the key dates and everything through your home groups, that sort of thing. Essentially, get the ball rolling now with your internal communication. Get Christmas into people's heads even this early so they can start inviting friends and family as well as just putting it in their own diaries. And if you're doing lots of events, then maybe in those church-wide communications, you want to keep it to the highlights. But think about specific messages to smaller groups. So individual ministries will already hopefully be promoting their own events. For example, if you've got a seniors group that's going to be having a Christmas meal, they're probably already talking about it. And the most effective way of getting people along is that they'll be telling them about that at their next meeting. But you might want to think about, if you've got events for specific people, then send out a smaller email just to people who are going to be involved or interested in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then sort of following on from that, of thinking of what's going on in your event calendar, you know, what's coming up between now and Christmas. So these are all opportunities, even potential opportunities to publicise your Christmas events, and can really help to give you an idea of deadlines that you need to be thinking about. For example, if you've got a service welcoming students back to the area for the new term, you could include some Christmas dates there, and then you know that you have to make a slide or create a handout that needs to be produced ready for that service. And using other events, especially those where you're likely to have a lot of visitors, is a really helpful way to ramp up Christmas. If, you know, people are coming through the doors for the first time, make it easy for them to come back by letting them know what's going on in the near future. So for that might be harvest festivals. You know, if you've got schools and families coming in for that, or remembrance services, there's likely times when you've got new people, or new people to your church, not necessarily new to your community, but new people coming into the church building.
Yeah, for sure.
Then think about, what are the headlines? So thinking in particular about invites that you put out to those in your local area, try to pick up sort of 1 or 2 highlights that are likely to capture people's attention. You know, often this looks like kind of carols by candlelight or a Christmas celebration on Christmas Day. And it's the time of year when people are actually looking for traditions and for different ways to kind of, you know, feel Christmassy and do things. So don't let that go to waste. This isn't to say that you won't mention other events, but trying to give everything top billing kind of probably results in a slightly messy publicity where, to be honest, nothing really stands out.
Yeah, it just becomes a bit of a blur of everything, and people don't pick out anything in particular. Yeah. So branding Christmas is a really helpful thing to do, but can be a bit daunting. So here we're talking about, is there a common theme across all of your events that you can use to tie everything together in how you promote them? And hopefully we can be a little bit more creative than the theme is Christmas. So try to think outside of the box. You know, perhaps there are some different styles that you can bring in from the traditional sort of fairy lights and stars. Just make things a little bit different so that they'll stand out from any other Christmas publicity that's going around. Or maybe there are some topical issues that are going on right now that will link in nicely. And so this is the sort of thing where it's worth talking to the people who are running the events or who are speaking at them to see what topics they're thinking about speaking about and whether there's sort of a tie-in there. And I'm going to mention a little case study later on in this episode, which might help to inspire you with some sort of slightly different ideas. But at the same time, don't overthink it. You know, if it's already quite late in the day to be thinking about your Christmas publicity, then doing something simple and traditional that you can get out there is better than nothing. If you're really short on time or ideas, then you can go to somewhere like CPO, which we're going to link in the show description, where there's templates that you can customize and download or order as printed materials. But then once you've got your theme, you need to think about what you actually need to produce. So first of all, printed items like posters or flyers that you can give out at church or at the events, as we've mentioned, or even through people's letterboxes, which, though it does take quite a bit of effort to do, it's still a really effective way of reaching people. And you might also want to think about asking local shops or cafes if they're happy for you to put a poster up in their window or on a notice board or something like that. It's always worth a try. Have you thought about doing something with local radio or local newspapers who may be willing to do something for cheap or even free at Christmas time? It's always worth a look there. And then obviously social media. You need to produce things. You need to produce graphics that can be put out to communicate your events on social media. And hopefully you can have a bit of a variety so that it's not just the same thing of come to our Christmas events every week, you know, spread it out a bit, vary it up. But it is important to get something up there as soon as possible because people get so busy in December that you want them to be able to get it in their calendar and make a priority of it. So give as much warning as you can. And then you might also want to look back at that upcoming event calendar and see if there's an event which is going to relate more to a certain audience. So you can then think about producing something specific for it. Again, going back to that seniors ministry example, if they have a Christmas event for seniors, then you might want to produce a flyer for that, which they can give out at their next event. And it might be that the main thing on there is the event, the seniors Christmas event, but then on the back or in smaller font at the bottom, you've got details of your other Christmas events or details of your website and how to find out more as well. And then when it comes to actually producing and printing these things, make sure you do it in as much time as you can. You know, give yourself time in case there are issues with the prints or the printers, or you need to change a date on something and come back, and just have that time built into your deadlines if you can. And then make sure you communicate to the people that are running the events where you actually want to give the flyers out. You know, tell them that you're going to be producing, printing and giving them flyers to actually hand out. Because the last thing you want is for the flyers that you've worked really hard to produce to end up forgotten in a pile on the piano at the end of the meeting. Or on the flip side, to have them handed out to people, but only a day or two before the event's actually going to happen. And so they haven't really got time to do anything about it and get along.
Yeah. I heard recently about a community event where someone put some flyers somewhere and the people that owned the building or were running the building sort of threw them away because they hadn't asked permission and all of that. And it sort of was very frustrating for this person who was telling me the story, because they were like, I worked really hard. I mean, there's not the only place the flyers were, but sort of like actually, had there been a bit of communication, actually, it would have been quite helpful to have the flyers there, and it sort of was a wasted opportunity. Yeah. So then if we think about promoting on social media, again, make sure that you're giving yourself plenty of time to promote events. Unfortunately, the way the kind of algorithm is working now, that things are not sort of posted in chronological order, or it doesn't appear on your feed at the time when people are posting them. So don't wait until the day or 2 days before the event to say, come along to XYZ as your first post. Tell people about the events weeks before, keep drip feeding them information about it so they have time to kind of acknowledge and recognize, sort of process, and not that they necessarily need to respond, but even internally respond of going, yes, we're going to go to that. Whereas if you're posting something the day before, they're going to be like, I haven't had time.
Yeah.
I've made arrangements or something like that.
And that's especially the case when people don't often come to church, and it might be a daunting thing for them, and it just needs a bit of time in their mind for them to decide I might want to come along to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then make sure to post stuff afterwards. There's nothing worse. And I think, I wouldn't say churches are guilty of this, not just churches. A lot of people are guilty of this, where they're like, come to our event, yay, yay. The event happens, and then crickets, and you don't hear anything after. It can be really nice to say, thank you for coming. We had a great time. It was lovely to start the Christmas celebrations if that's your first event, or to kind of conclude our Christmas calendar. Share a few photos if you're able to, or even some feedback. If you're chatting to people over the mince pies and mulled wine, and someone says, oh, that was a really lovely service. It's been a while since I've been to church or something, or we come here every year. It's like our family tradition.
Yeah.
Obviously ask them if you can kind of quote that, but actually sharing something that's really nice to put up on the church Facebook page of saying, this is what someone said, that coming to our church service is the sort of the thing that makes our Christmas weekend, not weekend, it's not always a weekend, but the candlelit service is the start of our Christmas week. I think that's a really nice thing to put out.
Yeah, and it's when there are those positive things, it's sort of just capitalizing on them, really. And I guess it's like we talked about with Judith when thinking about data, and we have data, we have these sort of interactions with people, and it's just nice to actually use them, follow up on them.
Yeah, exactly. I'm dropping my fairy lights everywhere now. And then utilise features like Facebook events, which is really, I think that's the only place that you can sort of create specific events, but create them to invite people to. And okay, maybe not everyone is on Facebook, but there's a number of reasons why it works really well, because you've got a space, so not on your main Facebook page, but a designated space where you as an individual, your church, and your congregation, make sure that they're inviting people, but you can all invite people to this event. Again, us, the Candlelit Carol service, we go every year. We're going to invite our friends to come along with us because, again, it's tradition. It also allows you to gauge a bit of an idea as to who might attend. So you could be like, well, we don't know how many people are going to come to the crafts. Well, 50 people in our community have sort of expressed interested. Actually, we should prepare that maybe we're going to have 50 people. Might be more, might be less, but at least you've got an idea.
Yeah.
Then also it allows you to kind of, again, that designated space allows you to share content, frequently asked questions, insights or behind the scenes or something that are really fun to share for a specific space. So again, if you're preparing for the candlelit carol service, it's a bit of a tongue twister, that you can, obviously you can share this content elsewhere, but you could actually on the page, but oh, look, we're getting ready, we've decorated the church, or oh, look at all this stack of mince pies. And you can kind of like build that community and build a bit of interest with those attending. I think it's a really undervalued, not tool, but sort of feature within events that people don't use. They just use it to kind of make an event and that's it. And they don't really talk to people in it. But actually, it can be quite fun sort of in the run up to the event.
Yeah, I've seen that used well and make a difference in the past.
Yeah, and when it's done well, it can be really, really effective. And whilst it can be nice to share posts a few times for event invitations, whether that's a poster, a flyer, or one specific graphic, try to mix it up what you're posting, so it's rather than the same poster being posted on your feed, and actually that ends up taking up all of your sort of main feed over the Christmas season. You can probably share stuff fairly repeatedly on stories, both on Facebook and Instagram, but your main feed might want to be different. So otherwise people kind of end up just tuning out a bit when they see the same post over and over again. So whether that's, again, you've got the main flyer or poster that you've posted once and then maybe a few weeks later, but actually you could do like, oh, this is the song we're going to be singing, or where's your favourite mince pie from? Hopefully
it's
we
just taking the theme, but not sticking just to the publicity or the graphics you've produced, but thinking a bit outside the box with it.
And
it takes more work, but it's worth doing.
Oh, absolutely.
And then thinking about your church website as well, that's obviously a key part of your comms strategy for people who maybe they've seen something on social media and then come to the website, or maybe they're coming to it fresh. So rather than just including a graphic on there, or even worse, we do see it, a picture that someone's taken of a flyer that's been printed, why not temporarily change the focus of your homepage? Like, make it take over the site. Have Christmas there. You might want to have key details of one or two of the main events, but you could also have a link to a Christmas page where it has all of the details, and maybe even the link that people can download a flyer to print to give it out to people, that sort of thing. The key is to make it easy for people to find information, but then also to make it easy for them to share. And this is the last really practical point ahead of Christmas, is encourage inviting.
Absolutely.
It makes such a huge difference. I've said it before that the events that I've run in the past that have been the most popular in terms of having the biggest turnout have been where we've got people to actively send messages to individuals that we know might be interested in coming, but probably won't come without a bit of a push. It makes a massive difference. So do that for people in your church that you're aware of that might be a little bit on the edge, but encourage your members, encourage your congregation to be inviting people personally. That is going to make a huge difference compared to any of the other publicity strategies that you do.
Yeah.
So hopefully if you do these things, you have a pretty effective Christmas comm strategy, even if it is a little bit last minute this year. So the last question really is, what can we do to avoid the same thing, the same last minute rush happening next year?
Yes, so the first answer to that is that we covered this all in fuller detail in our previous Next Christmas episode. So do go and listen to that. But the main sort of key action for now is to follow up for next year. And the first people to think about are your attendees. So are you making it easy for new people to keep in touch with you and find out what's going on after Christmas? Do you have a public email newsletter that they can sign up for? Or are you posting on social media? It's for people like this that you need to remember to not stop all the social media activity on the 26th of December. And I know that, you've probably all done much more over the last 6 weeks than you do for sort of the rest of the year, but you need to strike while the iron of their interest is hot and keep in touch and share what's going on. And that's kind of to encourage you as well as to still do things in January, because if someone's coming along at Christmas, because it's tradition, or they're new to the area, or they just felt like it because they saw a poster in their local co-op, to then not talk sort of to them for 6 weeks, 2 months, 3 months. I have
basically
seen
until Easter.
Yeah, kind of thing. That actually they're now not interested. Whereas if you've prompted some questions over Christmas in the Candlelight Carol service of going, this is why we celebrate Christmas. Okay, obviously there's only so much that you can sort of talk about in a service, but to then answer those questions of, well, what does this mean? What happened? Why is this important? Answer that over January when they might be thinking about those sorts of things. Then also to follow up with your team. So like we've said before, have a team meeting or to reflect upon what's gone well and what you can improve upon. January is a really busy time, so it's better to get it scheduled in sooner rather than later. And also whilst everything's really fresh in people's minds of going, actually, this we really struggled with, or we had a problem with the printers and then we had to go and find someone else and it cost us much more than what we were expecting, and that was very stressful. Whereas they probably forgot about that if you're waiting until February, March time, because there's so much going on over Christmas and then kind of afterwards.
I thought it would be helpful at this point to include just a brief kind of case study. That's probably overselling it, but just talk about something we did a few years back. So this is at my church in Bournemouth. We had a brand for Christmas that was called Simply Christmas. And rather than having your sort of the holly, the Christmas presents, the stars, all those typical things, we went with a really minimal, neutral theme. So we had kind of beigey cream backgrounds and colour palettes going on. But one of the events in the run-up to Christmas that actually was proving to be really popular at the time was the ladies would do a craft evening. And what they had planned in advance, because they were way more organised than we were, was essentially a nativity scene that they were going to make together in photo frames out of pebbles, which kind of linked in with the beach, I guess, although it's a sandy beach, but that's by the by. So they made a nativity scene out of these pebbles, a really nice minimal thing. And so we thought, why not let's take that theme and stretch it out to all of Christmas. And they had some that they'd made earlier as sort of prep things, examples for people to follow, and they'd done that in advance. So we had a bit of a photo shoot. We got a photographer to help us with that and get some really nice clean images of these crafts. And then we took that and sort of manipulated it so that we maybe had, for example, the carol service may have had just like the shepherds in a frame. Or that we had the main Christmas one had like the fuller nativity scene and that sort of thing, and just spread it out over those things. And it meant that we had a nice cohesive theme for everything, but also thematically for what was going to be spoken about. So it was what is the real meaning of Christmas? How can we get rid of all of the stuff that's around it and get back to it? And it all worked together really well. And it meant that we didn't just have to have the same thing on every social media post, but we had that we could play around with, had it planned in advance. So that was something that was really helpful for us and maybe is a little bit inspiring for you in some way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's I quite like that. I like ones I saw, I think it was last Christmas. It wasn't like a brand thing, but it would be really cool I think I saw it with glass and wood, but essentially it was like the silhouettes, but in like interpreted. So it's, I'm guessing, similar to if it's pebbles, of like a bigger one and then a smaller one by a small one, and then like 3 medium ones and stuff like that. And it was sort of like, you can see, oh, it's Mary, Joseph, Jesus, wise men, shepherds, but in a not obvious, here's a painting or a photo of it. It was sort of quite kind of interpretive, but very simple and elegant.
Yeah. And that whole project took some thought. It had to be done quite far in advance. Obviously we had the different elements, we had the craft, we had the photo shoot and everything like that, but it worked really well. And I think it was a bigger church, so we had slightly more resources than others may have, but I think it was worth doing compared to just going and finding whatever stock photo that we could think of.
Yeah. And I bet your church really enjoyed everyone getting involved in that and felt like they'd played a part in it. Yeah. So the final thing then, and possibly the most important, is prayer. We could have the most incredible thought through publicity and communications plan, or you could have the ugliest, most clip arty design of Comic Sans, or 100 other fonts and spelling errors and something that really hurts me. But the reality is God can use both. So, pray for his blessing over your publicity and the events themselves, that he would bring the lost sheep back into the fold. So that is us done. We hope that has been helpful. We won't say Happy Christmas. I really want to, as we're sort of thankful. Well, I'm not thankful. I mean, I'm ready for Christmas. Bring on Christmas. We're not quite there yet, but we do wish you all the best with your seasonal planning. Normal service resumes in our next episode, where we will be talking about the topic of blogs on church websites. See you there.